Good morning, Hammer. All right, this morning we're going to be talking about the police and filming, and I'll probably mention some auditors. But cops with drones, man, when pigs fly. Let's do this. Good morning. All right. So, on this show in the past, we've been a little hard on the police of late because, well, frankly, they've been a little hard on us, the people of the United States. And today is, frankly, they've been a little hard on us. I mean, the people. Happy holiday, everybody. I hope those of you that are Dragon God enthusiasts got out and enjoyed the show. Happy holiday, everybody. I hope quite carefully avoided it. Steve says I have an echo. Let me see if happy holiday, everybody. Let me see if I can identify that problem. Steve says I have an echo. Let me see if all right, bear with me a second. Couple of quick little things. Let's see if I can correct that. And all right, let me know if that fixed it, guys. I see what happened. Ooh. It's, Danny, it's your fault. Well, it's yours and Alex's fault. Because what happened was, I went to watch, the TPS report live on Rumble, and I forgot to turn the sound off on the Rumble feed before I started the show this morning. My bad. All right, so, cops. That's right. Danny is a very bad influence with her healthy habits vlog, which there should be a new episode of today. I'm assuming I haven't checked for it yet today. But anywho, so I've got an article that I want to read with you guys, and we're going to talk about the recent inadequacy of the police relative to, I mean, let's face it, the security of the citizen. So New York police, this article comes from AP News, most recently dated August 31st, so end of the week last week. New York police will use drones to monitor backyard parties this weekend, spurring privacy concerns. That right there. Okay. Drones. I love my drones. I have a tidy little fleet of birds myself. A couple of different Mavics and Phantoms that I fly professionally. I make money flying drones. I do real estate photography, videography. We just did some drone footage for a wedding venue that we're doing a promotional video for. Drones aren't exactly my bread and butter, but they definitely pump up that bottom line for me. Danny asks, how many will be shot down? You know, I want to say none because it's New York and they have some of the most restrictive gun laws in the country. But then again, it's New York, where they have more criminals than most anywhere else. So, and Steve asks, isn't there a Fourth Amendment violation all over this? Yes, there absolutely is. Patrick says, Steve, not when it comes under the guise of security, and that I'll get to in a little more detail in just a minute. So, the New York City Police, those attending outdoor parties or barbecues in New York City this weekend may notice an uninvited guest looming over their festivities, a police surveillance drone. The New York City Police Department plans to pilot the unmanned aircrafts in response to complaints about large gatherings, including private events over Labor Day weekend, officials announced Thursday. Guys, I hate the GCM in with us this morning. This episode would be right up his alley, and this might be something that we need to come back and revisit and have GCM and maybe a few other First Amendment auditors on to talk about. But if a caller states the police. Kaz Daughtry, the assistant NYPD commissioner, says if a caller states there's a large crowd, a large party in a backyard, we're going to be utilizing our assets to go up and go check on the party. So Steve mentioned there that there's a Fourth Amendment violation all over this, and that's correct. A person under the language of the Fourth Amendment, we are supposed to be able to feel secure in our persons, properties, and papers, which is to say that on private property, the Constitution says that you should have a great deal of freedom. In fact, near immunity to all government interference. I would go so far as to say, properly interpreted, the Fourth Amendment says you can grow pot on your property if you want to, and no law should be able to say differently. You can keep automatic weapons on your property, and no law should be able to say differently. Forget about the Second Amendment for just a minute. As far as firearms on your private property, you are to be secure in your person's properties and papers. Under the Fourth Amendment, anything short of basically keeping slaves and conducting absolute atrocities against other people and thereby violating their rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What goes on private property is none of the government's business, right? Even going back as far as arguing over the precursors to Obergefell, it was always my position that two consenting adults engaged in private activity between one another, even if that activity involves a private contract, as long as you're talking about consenting adults engaged in their own mutual interest, the law has no interest there. The law should only be interested ever in the protection of individual citizens from the causing of harm by external forces. So, the police are a legitimate organization insofar as they serve the law where the law is legitimate. And in a case like this, there are a couple of major violations going on here. If you've got police, if you've got law enforcement operating surveillance equipment over private properties without due process, right? We're not talking about using drones to surveil a known drug dealer who is actively engaged in the violation of the law, against whom warrants have been sworn and signed. We're not talking about there being an existence of any probable cause or even articulable reasonable suspicion of crime. They literally said in the article, and when I say they said in the article, I mean that in quoting the NYPD Assistant Commissioner, it says, if a caller states that there is a large crowd, a large party in a backyard, we're going to be utilizing our assets to go up and check on the party. Fourth Amendment, you are to be secure in your persons, properties, and papers. Now, First Amendment. When we think about the First Amendment, people tend to get confused on the meanings here. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom to petition the government for redress of grievances. And I know I listed them out of order because I wanted to get to this one last in this list. the freedom to assemble. Now, people tend to think of the freedom to assemble, the freedom of assembly. People tend to associate that with protest, the freedom to gather in a traditional public forum and articulate concerns and complaints, the freedom to protest. The freedom to protest and the freedom to assembly are not the same thing. When you start talking about protests, right, what you're talking about is not an individual liberty. The freedom that you have to protest hinges on three legs: the freedom of assembly, the freedom in traditional public fora of citizens to gather in numbers without being harassed by government. That coupled with the freedom to speak, the freedom to say the words you want to say, and the liberty to petition the government for a redress of grievances. What a protest is, when conducted correctly, when conducted reasonably, is a large gathering of people gathered lawfully, protected in their gathering. The government is, in this case, is supposed to guarantee that they go unmolested while they gather in a traditional public forum and speak freely on the issue in question. And that gathering is legally indistinct from a petition containing the same number of signatures. It is a petition to the government for a redress of grievances. Now, that is not to say that every petition for a redress of grievances is a reasonable petition which should be addressed or redressed. However, the right of the people to peaceably assemble, speak freely. Somebody just sneezed in my studio. Oh my goodness! It's a baby girl. It's my Eleanor. Good morning, my Eleanor. Okay, Ellie, look up. That is the monitor. But the people that are looking at us, you see how it looks like we're looking away from the camera? That is the camera right there. Can you wave and say, hey, everybody? Can you wave and say, good morning, everybody?
Hey, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, can I have a hug? Oh, my goodness. Good morning, baby girl. And a kiss. Okay. Can you go back upstairs and get some breakfast? I'll be up in a few minutes, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Watch out for the headphones. You tangle up. There you go. Okay, I'll be up in a minute. Oh. So let me give y'all a little insight on what just happened there, too. Y'all heard her sneeze. I'm deaf as a stump when I don't have my hearing aids in. So when I'm at my desk working and I've got my hearing aids out and I've got my headphones on so I can work on video and process audio stuff, I can't hear anything going on. But while I'm live and the microphone's working, I can hear the studio monitor. So when I heard her sneeze behind me, I was not prepared for that. And of course, she's totally derailed me on what I was talking about. Okay, the freedom to protest. So your ability to protest stems from your right to assemble, your right to speak, your right to redress government for petition the government for a redress of grievances. That said, the assembly piece, right here, this assistant NYPD commissioner has just stated plainly, if a caller states there's a large crowd, a large party in a backyard, we're going to be utilizing our assets to go up and go check on the party. Okay, I'm going to reference the First Amendment auditors here. Often, when you see a First Amendment audit, the better auditors, because there are some shitbags out there. There are some shitty auditors out there. But most of the guys who have become First Amendment auditors, who are popular First Amendment auditors, auditing is not what they do full time, right? You'll hear them say, "I'm an independent journalist," and they get mocked for that. Like, "Oh, well, you're just here to cause trouble," and no, right? Like the Amagansett Press guys, they actually do travel vlogs, but people are funny, and they'll get the police involved, and the cops will come, and 99 times out of 100, the police walk away. Usually when you have a bad interaction, it's a young rookie cop, and then his supervisor, his sergeant or his lieutenant or his captain ends up on the scene and says, no, you're not just wrong here, young officer. You're committing a crime by interfering with this man's right to exist in public spaces and to film and even comment on what he's filming. Because a lot of these guys, when they say they're independent journalists, that's exactly what they are. They'll go to a protest and cover it, and then they'll sell their coverage of the story to a news outlet. And in many cases, that only includes, okay, I'm filming a protest right now. My commentary, I'm not doing any commentary on it. I'm going to sell this footage to a news outlet that has somebody writing a story about the article or about the event, and then they're going to write up an article, and they're going to include some of this footage that they purchased from me on the web page with the newspaper article, and that. So in many of the cases with the First Amendment auditors, that's what they're doing when police interfere. And the thing that they publish on their auditing channel is the police interaction. In many cases, the citizens will actually call 911 instead of the non-emergency police line, which, guys, okay, 911 is for emergencies. Okay, it's kind of like you don't go to the emergency room because you threw up. You go to the emergency room because you can see bones protruding from your body. You go to the emergency room because there's a legitimate, immediate, acute concern that your life or limb is in peril. You don't go to the emergency room to get a dab of penicillin on your pee-pee hole. There are urgent cares and doctors for that, right? You got a bad stomach ache, you call the doctor. You make an appointment to go see him tomorrow or the next day. Or you go into urgent care, etc., right? You got somebody with a camera and you're suspicious of them, you call the non-emergency police number. And you should all know your non-emergency police number or have it saved in your smartphone. When a call comes into a police department and the call is there's somebody on the public street with a camera, it should be that the police explain, if he's in public, he has the right, guaranteed by the First Amendment, to film what he sees. Anything he can see for public. Now, that's what should happen, is the dispatcher should say, there's no crime being committed. Right? Maybe we send an officer out to talk to you and explain to you that you're a nut job and you're calling men with guns to come and harass private citizens engaged in constitutionally protected activity. But there are some auditors who specifically audit government institutions. And they rely on a law, in part, on a law which the police also rely on. And that is the plain view doctrine. So many of these auditors will go around to police departments and they'll go into the parking lot and they'll film the police cars. They'll walk around the police cars. They'll say, okay, looks like the tires are good. Looks like the tag is up to date. And then, and then they'll look in the window And this is where the officers get kind of sketchy with it. They'll look in the window of the police car, especially if the window's open, but they'll film through the window of the police car, not putting the camera inside, just what they can see from the window. And one of the biggest things that they look for when they do that is whether or not the police officer has locked and closed his computer before he walked away from it. And this one's actually important. A police officer, this is plain view doctrine. You can film what you can see from public. Contrary to popular belief, if you've got your blinds open and people are looking in your window, that person may be a pervert, but they're not breaking the law if they're standing on a public street and looking into your window, through the glass. If you want privacy under the law, you have to secure that yourself. You have to put up blinds, curtains, etc. And that applies in these police cars too. So if a cop walks away from his computer and it's just sitting open on his dashboard, unlocked, he's displaying private information, not his private information. He is putting on display the private information of citizens. He is violating their right by having that computer open and unsecured. He is violating their right to privacy by removing from them the ability to secure their own information. They like to pitch, the cops like to pitch a temper tantrum about that and say, you can't look in our cars. Yes, I 100% abso-fucking-lutely can. Anything I can see from a publicly accessible area. Now, that same plain view doctrine is what officers will use to generate even a spurious charge of, even a spurious articulable suspicion or probable cause. For example, you've been driving, you had a baggie of sandwiches and you ate one of them, and because you're still driving, you didn't pull over and find a trash can. You threw a plastic baggie in the floorboard, thinking, "Oh, I'll pick that up and throw it away." This is from a particular case, and you get pulled over for whatever reason. I think in that case the tag was expired, so perfectly reasonable traffic stop under the law, technically. And the officer said, "Oh, I see that baggie. People keep drugs in baggies. Now I'm going to pull you out of your car and search your car." Well, that's the plain view doctrine. He cannot just choose to search your car. He needs a reasonable articulable suspicion at a minimum. And to actually violate your Fourth Amendment rights and search the vehicle, he needs probable cause. In this, what we're talking about, not only are we talking about cops using surveillance in the panopticon to conduct surveillance activities against citizens. In New York in particular, there is a law from 2020, New York City law, that requires the NYPD to disclose its surveillance tactics. They're in violation of their own law, not just constitutional law, but these police are operating in violation of their own law. Now, bear in mind, when I'm talking about things like reasonable suspicion and probable cause, I want y'all to think back to the Russia hoax for a moment. A big part of the Russia hoax involved the illegal surveillance of Donald Trump during his candidacy and during his presidency. Our law enforcement agencies, the FBI in particular, conducted espionage against a sitting president of the United States based on false warrants. This is not, and like so many of the things that we say about the Democrats and recent political activity, we are not in this case talking about some crackpot conspiracy theory, some wild guess. we have the receipts. We've seen the emails. We've seen the warrants. We've seen the evidence compared. And we know that the FISA warrant applications that were made to the FISA court that actually issued warrants to conduct the surveillance, those warrant applications were fraudulent. Not just specious, not merely incorrect, but we have the premeditated, the confession, we have the evidence that a decision was made to fabricate these fraudulent warrants in order to secure warrants for illicit surveillance against a sitting president by the same FBI, by the self-same FBI that could generate 1,000 wanted posters for January 6th participants and has failed to arrest a single arsonist from the May 29th insurrection where they set the president's church on fire. It may seem like every conversation we have recently comes back to Donald Trump being treated badly. And it is, and there's a reason for that. It is because the rot, the corruption that enabled our conquerors to come into this country and take it by force and fraud, the same rot, the same corruption that generated the insurrections conducted by BLM, funded, I might add, funded by elected Democrats, right? No, never forget, Kamala Harris personally funded terrorists and insurrectionists to conduct war activities against the United States of America throughout the entire period of her campaign for president and vice president. She personally wrote checks to fund war against the United States by citizens of the United States. That is what insurrection is by definition, by the way. When they refer to January 6th, you hear people call January 6th an insurrection. They don't know what the fucking insurrection is. Holding territory and killing people, that's an insurrection. And Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, they wrote checks to fund that. And I'm not speaking in the abstract like, oh, you know, this is the kind of stuff. No, they specifically funded the organizations that were posting bail for people who were arrested in conjunction with the related protest activities, which, by the way, only included low-level protesters. They were not making arrests on people who were throwing firebombs at federal buildings, on people who murdered MAGA supporters in cold blood in the street, right? Police officers were killed by these people, and that activity was all but ignored, essentially, by our law enforcement and our government. It is not a question of the amount of legitimacy that remains for our law enforcement entities. The fact is that the Democrat Party has, for all practical purposes, abolished the law, the entire body of it, with their corruption and violence over the last half decade. So, if you see a drone in the air, do not try to shoot it down. That is also a major crime. But there are some things that I would love to see. I hope to see individual citizens, again, this is in New York, where, I mean, I do not expect to see a big backlash from New Yorkers over this. I expect to hear them bitch and moan. But if you see and I didn't even get into the the RFID tracking thing. Okay, let me get into that a little bit. Okay, so remote ID is coming to drones as of the 16th of this month. In theory, drones will be required to have an RID transmitter installed on them. The FAA has issued exemptions for law enforcement to conduct surveillance, but outside of specific surveillance, they're not supposed to be able to fly their drones without the same RID that's required of citizens. It is not required yet. That goes into effect on September 16th. I fully expect that there are going to be some extensions and that enforcement is going to be lax. There are some serious concerns about RID, not least of which are that you'll be able to download an app which you can use to access the RID of a drone if there's a drone flying near you, which means that Joe Citizen can pull out his phone and say, oh shit, I see a drone. I wonder who that is, right? And they can access the RID on the drone. If that ever comes to full fruition, you see a drone that you're wondering about, and you check it, and it turns out to be a police drone, I want to see people file suit. I want to see people bring suit against whatever police department owns that aerial surveillance vehicle and drag these officers into court and make them answer to the people for the crime of operating the Panopticon. And then I want to close on this, the Panopticon. I know most of you guys, I know Danny especially, is aware of what the Panopticon is. So the Panopticon is not exactly a Greek myth, but an old idea of a prison that's built with windows and mirrors situated in such a way that the entire prison is viewable by, and understand this is an idea that comes from before the advent of CCTVs, etc. It was the idea that you would have this series of mirrors and windows throughout a prison that set it up so that at no place in the prison were you not being watched, and that all of that could be viewed by a single person in a central location where all the mirrors relayed all the images back to one place. It's not, as I understand it, it's not physically possible to do on a larger scale with that limit of technology, but obviously with the advent of CCTV and now, of course, phone cameras, there's plenty of surveillance going on. You're always under surveillance. But the Panopticon, as it turns out, is a tricky bitch. In 1984, the citizens were subjected to surveillance by Big Brother, but they did not have their own surveillance to countermand it with. We do. We all have phones on we all have our smartphones with the camera on it. Use it. If you ever have an interaction with the police, you film that shit. If everything goes great, fine, awesome, right? Use your phone, film the police in any government interaction you have. Right? If you go to the courthouse to pay a fine, film the activity. Film your way through the courthouse. Right? You go to the post office to pick up a stamp. You don't need to pull out a big old DSLR and put it on $1,000 gimbal. Just turn your phone on and stick it in your pocket. Right? Just let the camera roll. Just in case some shit goes down, and hold your government employees accountable. The Panopticon is a thing now. But like any weapon, it can be picked up by anybody. You should not allow the government or the enemy to hold weapons that you do not yourself have access to. Take control of that and make use of it. I'm not saying that you all need to go out there and be auditors. I'm not. But there's so much room for abuse in this police state, surveillance state panopticon that we live in now, that you're a fool if you're not taking precautions to defend yourself, right? I told you guys this story before. I'll just quickly re-summarize it. I had an incident back in May where I was out to shoot pictures of a house, and I parked down the street, across the street, so my truck wouldn't be in the pictures. The homeowner down the street and across the street, not the homeowner for the house I was shooting, comes out and starts pitching a temper tantrum. He doesn't want me parked in front of his house. And I wasn't even in front of his house. I was off to the side of it. His house faced the perpendicular abutting street. But he comes out and he starts pitching a temper tantrum. And I told him, look, no, I'm not walking further than I have to. I'm not repacking my cameras just to move the truck. It's not happening. You're making an unreasonable request. I'm sitting on the public street, right? I'm not even making an argument about easements and whether or not the city owns part of your yard, which it does. It doesn't own it, but there's an easement there. But I was on the public thoroughfare, parked, everything legally, and under contract to perform services at a private residence quite separate from his. Cops showed up. They were perfect. Almost. They were polite. They were professional. One of them asked me for my ID. I told him he didn't need it because I hadn't done anything wrong. And his sergeant stepped in and said, no, he's right. You better give him a reason if you want to get his ID. And the officers explained to the homeowner, look, you're being unreasonable. This guy's obviously a professional photographer based on the equipment and the story about the house. There's no suspicious activity here. Go inside, mind your own business. Everything went perfectly. The police told the guy he was wrong. He went away. I went and shot pictures, did my job, made some money. A month and change later, I find out that right after that event, those officers responded to a car accident a couple streets away. Now, my event happened on Salem East Road, and theirs happened on Salem Road. Right? It's like a mile away. They go respond to a car accident, and when they wrote up the accident report, for some reason, they put my name and my license plate as the owner of the vehicle at fault. When I had to argue that and get it fixed by the sheriff's department, the fact that I had gotten the badge numbers from the officers, gotten the incident call report number with the time so I could get a copy of the police report with the timestamp on it from when they responded to me, and I had the video of what happened, I was able to force the sheriff's department to pull up the body camera footage from those officers and review it in-house, right? Which is an important distinction, because I could have gotten it through a FOIA request, but then I would have had to pay for the footage. Instead, I made the sheriff's department bear that cost because they screwed me. I didn't need to get screwed anymore. But because I had my own surveillance on the incident, and I had taken the time and the effort to secure the information necessary, that being the badge numbers, incident numbers, car numbers, and all that, I was able to get that situation sorted out. And in fairness, there are two fair things to say about the officer that made the mistake. I understand how he made the mistake, and it was sloppy record keeping. He had a little notebook that he was just scrolling down a page on. Son, 1 page per incident. You write your notes about my thing on a page, you turn the page, you write the notes about the next thing. That'll prevent this problem in the future. It was a small error that caused a big problem. And the only reason that problem didn't get blown way, way out of proportion is because as an aware citizen, as somebody who has worked in the conduct of surveillance activities, I think I can say that much. I have my head around what can happen there. And so I had acquired enough information to defend myself in that particular case. Use your cameras, right? I've got a little camera pen and a little body camera that I wear for some stuff. you use your phone, right? Definitely get a dash camera. You can get a decent dash cam for $100 or $200. Mount it in your vehicle and just let it run and forget about it. Get that done. Okay, I'm going to put a pin in it right there. I've got some work to do around the house. Thanks for watching this morning, guys. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.